Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Don Lemon Show. Thank you so much. This is breaking news. There you see Katie Phang up on the screen, the renowned journalist who is joining us now from the Midas Touch Network, formerly of MSNBC. Katie, we have some breaking news as it involves the Diddy trial in New York City. I understand they've reached a verdict, but there's a hang-up, correct?
Yeah, there is. So as of right now, there was a 5-count indictment, Don, that P. Diddy was looking at. According to the jurors, they came back with a note saying that they had reached a verdict on 4 out of the 5 counts. And Don, the one that they're hung up on is the critical one. It's the racketeering count, which is one of the biggest ones that P. Diddy was looking at. As of the last reporting that I can tell everybody right now, the jurors came in. They were instructed by the judge to continue to attempt to deliberate, but the judge did say, being mindful of the time, it's almost 5:30 Eastern. He said, please send back a note when you go back to the jury room and let me know if you want to continue to deliberate today or if you want to come back tomorrow. And so we're just waiting to find out whether or not they're going to continue later on tonight, which they can, by the way, Don. If they want to, they can work through dinner and continue to deliberate.
Now, here's what my sources are telling me. I don't know if it's 100% confirmed, Katie, but I'm hearing that they are going to go home. That's what I'm hearing. I'm not sure, but producers, you may want to double check on that. But I am hearing that they possibly said that they're going to let them go home tonight and finish up for the evening and then come back tomorrow. But Katie, you're right. That racketeering charge, that is the big charge. That is the thing that will send him away for a long, long time.
Yeah, the other counts also have serious exposure for him, but it kind of makes you wonder, Don, as we kind of read the tea leaves here, if the jurors are hung up. And by the way, the note was very clear. It said that there were jurors on both sides with, quote, unpersuadable views. In my mind, obviously, that means that people are digging in their heels on both sides of the guilt aisle. And so if they don't believe that P. Diddy was responsible for some huge criminal enterprise that included the trafficking, the prostitution, the drugs, then does that necessarily mean that they believed the victims in this case, like Cassie Ventura? Remember, Cassie Ventura also is the victim in at least 2 of the 4 counts that they say that they have reached a verdict. But Don, I want to caution everybody, jury trials, total gambles on both sides for the prosecution and the defense. That jury could come back tomorrow, keep on deliberating, and they could change their mind on the counts that they say that they've already reached.
Oh, Katie, we need to remind you, you're an attorney, so you know what is going on here. So what is this? What does this say to you that they, on the most important charge, that they are hung up on this one?
Well, listen, they've been deliberating for more than 12 hours. And to answer your statement, or to say, yes, I am attorney. I've been a trial lawyer. I've done criminal and civil jury trials. And there's a big issue when it deals with jurors. Jurors are people like you and me and the amazing people in the Lemon Nation. They are sitting there and they're trying to sift through more than 6 weeks of evidence. I will say, if you look at things like portions of Cassie Ventura's testimony, the transcript, both sides agreed to let the jury check it out, Don. It went back to that jury room and say they were able to look at portions of her testimony. It does seem to me that they wanted to kind of secure what they thought about Cassie Ventura's credibility. And the other victims in this case, they are also making up the balance of those counts. And so the jury either says, you know what, I either like him or I don't like him. This is one of those cases, Don, where people go in with really strong emotions about what they think about somebody.
Yeah. Being on a jury, having worked in this and being on a jury like this, when did they start deliberations? Was it on Friday or Thursday that they started deliberations?
They actually have been doing it they started it yesterday, actually. So today is Tuesday, late Tuesday. They started yesterday. They had a note within 2 hours, Dawn, telling the judge that juror number 3 was not following the judge's instructions. Today it was the 6th note that they have sent in 12 hours. Don, that's a lot of notes. I'm going to tell you right now, that's a lot of notes. Suggests there's a little bit of some chaos going on inside of that jury room if there's 6 notes that are being sent in for the judge to consider.
You said there's a little bit of chaos going on. Repeat, you cut out, Katie. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was saying the fact that in 12 hours of deliberations, you've seen 6 notes sent in to the court suggests to me that there's a little bit of chaos going on inside of that jury. Not to suggest that they're not being thoughtful and doing their jobs as jurors, but I am a little concerned that there's been at least 6 notes, and especially the first note saying that one of the jurors was not following the judge's instructions.
Yeah. I thought it was on Friday, but they got, they had closing arguments, and I remember having a discussion that whether, I think it was on Friday, whether they would have a verdict that day or whether it would be on Monday. But do you think that that's not a long time considering how serious these charges are? Am I wrong?
No, listen, that's a lot of evidence, right? We're talking weeks and weeks of evidence. We're talking lots of photos, testimony, records. There's just been so much for them to have to digest. 12 hours is not that long at all. But when it comes to a case like this, Don, this case hinges on credibility. This case does not hinge on whether the cop did his or her job properly. It doesn't hinge on whether or not the crime scene tech took the right photos. This case hinges 100% on whether or not the jurors believe that Cassie Ventura and the victims are telling the truth. And recall, P. Diddy said he wasn't going to testify in his own defense. He wasn't required to do so. The Constitution does not require you to testify in your own defense, but that's what they've been considering. They've only been able to consider the government's evidence in this case.
Your former colleague is here, Charles Coleman. You want to introduce him to us, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. We got Charles Coleman here. And you know what, Don? I couldn't think of anybody better. One, Charles is from the New York area, knows the federal courts in New York very well. Two, this is critical, Don. Charles is also a trial lawyer. When you've tried cases and you had to deal with not only picking a jury, but dealing with these nuances, I thought Charles would be a great voice for us to have. So, Charles, thanks for joining me and Don for this.
Great to see you, Katie. Great to see Don. Really appreciate you having me. One thing I'll add to the conversation for you both, I actually had the pleasure of trying a case in front of this very judge, Judge Subramanian, earlier this year in federal court. And so everything that we're seeing from him is to be expected. He's a very thoughtful judge. He's a very, very smart judge and very methodical, and someone who I know is going to be concerned about bringing this case to an actual verdict on as many counts as possible so that he doesn't create a space for reversible error. He doesn't create a space where the jury feels that they were rushed. And so that's why you see this sort of pouring over the instructions and encouraging the jury to get back at it and to continue to deliberate, and also letting the jury know, listen, it's okay for you to change your mind. And I think that for the defense, that's something that they're going to try and lean on, hoping that there's a juror who's in that jury room who can convince someone else, hey, listen, let's talk about these 4 counts that are likely convictions. Katie and I know this already, given the timing. The 4 counts that they've already decided on are probably going to be convictions. And so those are the counts that the defense is hoping, listen, let's see if we can get someone, or hope that there's someone who's able to persuade another juror to rethink that. And on the 5th count, that undecided count, I think that there's going to be a question around the racketeering, which is what I'm expecting is the one that's sort of hanging out there that they're unable to agree on. And if for the defense, if that stays what it is, they're going to be very, very happy. So at this point, the prosecution is thinking, let's see if the jury can focus on that 5th undecided count, whereas the defense is probably hoping that there's a juror who has enough persuasive impact that he can get, or he or she can get them to rethink their votes on the previous 4 counts.
Don, and we've got the latest. Your sources were correct, Don. The jury has been sent home for the day. The judge has thanked them for their service thus far and has said, please, obviously come back tomorrow ready to deliberate. I will say this, Don. What happens, though, is, and Charles can confirm, jurors leave and they go back to their respective lives, right? And you have to hope that when the jurors leave, that they're mindful of the instructions they've received, which is don't check out media, don't listen to the news, don't read the internet, don't be watching Don Lemon's show, right? They are saying but they're being told, do not be a consumer of information while you are serving as a juror. And so, Charles, talk about the risk, though, that things could change. Right now you're thinking there's a conviction on those counts 2, 3, 5, and that they're maybe not going to come to a verdict on that count 1. Your thoughts about maybe could they change their mind after they sit there and they mull it over tonight?
I think it is possible. We don't know what juries are thinking, but to your point, Katie, just for viewers, and this is something that you understand, this is where the dots become connected. This is where the universe of everything from the beginning of the trial with voir dire and jury selection comes into play when you're talking about the instructions that the judge has given the jury. Because in voir dire, for example, way back weeks ago, The judge has asked the jury, where do you get your news? What do you get your news sources from? Because now the question has to be, if you're an attorney on either side, you're thinking, hey, did I pick the right jurors? Because perhaps if they watch or listen to or read or consume the sources that I like, the sources that are going to put a slant on, that are going to be favorable to my position, this might sway them. No, they're not supposed to do this, but jurors are human beings. And at the end of the day, we may never know. And so this is a very interesting sort of connection between the beginning and a full circle moment. Now that the jury has to actually abide by that, and both sides of attorneys have to think, who did I put on this jury? But you're right, Katie. There is a possibility that somehow they could have had a disagreement about these counts, and now they go back and have more discussion, because what we don't know is we don't know how set in stone or how convinced these jurors were in terms of making that decision. We've both tried cases, especially closer to holidays. We understand that as the clock ticks and gets closer to a weekend or a holiday, jurors will be inclined to sort of soften their positions because they don't want to be there anymore. This is a trial that has gone on for weeks and they want to be done. And so this encouragement from Judge Subramanian to go back, to have more deliberations, to potentially engage in more debate is going to be a good thing if there are some jurors who are not convinced on their previous positions.
Charles and Katie, let me ask you a question. I know, again, according to the same source who told me that they were going home for the day, they were saying that the defense is not going, or didn't want to press the judge and the jurors to go back and try to decide. They're okay with a hung jury on this charge because this is the most serious charge. And chances are this is a thing that will keep them from going to jail for such a long time. The other things, of course, they have their own amount of liability, but not as much as that RICO charge. Am I wrong on that? Is my source wrong?
I mean, go ahead, Charles. Very quickly, yeah, I would agree with that. And I was going to say, Dawn, racketeering was such an interesting count here. It's one thing to sit there and charge the prostitution, so transportation for purposes of prostitution. It's another thing to charge the sex trafficking. It's another thing to sit there and make the allegations that they did. But a racketeering charge is always a complex one to build. It's actually a decent charge if you've got enough meat on the bone. And the prosecution had to be able to prove that Diddy was running this criminal enterprise. And I always equate it to like a wheel. You got Diddy in the middle, and all the different spokes of criminality are coming out of Diddy in the center of this. And so it was kind of a little bit of a heavy lift. And I don't want to suggest that they haven't gotten there, but I also want to remind our viewers right now, the jury can come back with a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict, frankly, on the counts 2 through 5. But Dawn, they can also come back with a hung jury on that one count, and it still survives, right? And the prosecution has to decide if they want to do it again. But Charles, your thoughts about whether or not this is an all or nothing proposition for this jury?
I don't know that the jury is making it an all or nothing proposition. I think, Katie, we've both had cases where the jury ultimately sort of splits the baby, so to speak, and they compromise by finding guilt on some counts and then remaining hung or altogether acquitting on another. I don't expect an out and out acquittal here, but what I will say to your question, Don, is absolutely, if you're the defense, of course, you would love to get either an acquittal or a hung jury on all counts. But the big one that you're most concerned with is the racketeering. And that's without question. That is the crown jewel for the prosecution here. I don't want to say that the prosecution would be embarrassed by not getting that charge, but that is by far the most weighty charge that's going to be on this verdict sheet. And so without that, despite the fact that they may have pretty much established by way of the law that he was guilty and that they can get a conviction, that doesn't mean that they convinced the jury. Obviously, we don't know yet. But ultimately, I think that if you are the defense and you had to pick and choose that there are going to be some convictions and some hung, you absolutely would take the hung on the racketeering and the convictions on the other, despite the fact that from a legal framework, if you get the other, that's the meat on the bone that Katie was referring to. And so there is enough. Theoretically, if they do find the guilt on the other counts, then it does follow that the racketeering should ultimately be found guilty. But that's not necessarily guaranteed, nor is it automatic. And so the defense is likely holding out. If they have one clear shot for a home run, proverbially speaking, it's going to be getting that hung jury on the racketeering charge and perhaps taking your lumps on the other ones for a lower sentence when we're done with this.
Yeah, the breaking news is you're watching the Don Lemon Show. We're joined by Charles Coleman and also the anchor of this show, who happens to be my show, but she's anchoring today. I just happened to jump in for a minute because I'm away, and Katie Phang was gracious enough to fill in for me. And it just so happens we are lucky to have her because she is an attorney. So, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. This is a breaking news. There's a verdict or verdicts in on the Diddy trial. I think there are 4 verdicts in that they found, but they're hung up on one, and that is the most serious charge, which is racketeering and conspiracy. Katie, am I right?
Yeah, the racketeering is the most serious. But, I also don't want to minimize, Don, in any way the fact that the trafficking dealing with Cassie Ventura and the other victim, Jane, that's her pseudonym, that means that they're not as important or not as critical. The prosecution always carries the burden of proof. It's beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And there's a reason why that burden of proof is higher in a criminal case than it is in a civil case, because Diddy's liberty is at stake. Now, the jury has not heard anything about it. The jury doesn't know what his criminal exposure is. The jury has no idea that he could be going to life in prison. And I want to remind people that for the sex trafficking accounts, the maximum punishment is life in prison. So Diddy may be looking at a racketeering count, and it is the most, quote, serious, but I will say that there's still massive exposure for him on the other ones. I also want to put out here too, part of the reason why the jurors are not supposed to be able to read and consume media, all kidding aside, we know that he's been actively jockeying for a pardon from Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely something that if I were a juror and I was not heeding my instructions from the judge, and I'm checking out the media and I'm reading that this guy is trying to get a Trump pardon, that would weigh on me as well if I was considering what to do with this guy, right? We're human. Mm-hmm. We're thinking about, does this guy get the punishment? If I'm thinking he's guilty, does he get the punishment that he deserves in my mind? And so, again, all kidding aside, that's part of the reason why these jurors are instructed not to consume any media when they're serving as jurors, because there's stuff like that that's floating out there in the internet ether that they could read and they could learn.
We would like to think that the jury always abides by that, but they don't really, do they? We hope that they do.
Well,
no, Charles, they don't. And look, it's human nature. I will say this, though. That point is actually a really underrated point, particularly in today's society with as much misinformation that exists. And I think that that's something that's a little bit different. When I was a prosecutor, I didn't necessarily have to worry as much about rampant conspiracy theories and all sorts of information just readily floating around the web at the rate that they do now. And people's sort of ability to filter out what's real, what's not, what's credible, and what isn't also becomes a bigger factor. So you've got the first layer of, listen, follow the judge's instructions, stay off the internet, don't consume any media. And then there's the next layer of, like, if you do go into that space, are you actually savvy enough not to come in contact with something that really makes you think differently about this, because it could potentially be misinformation or some sort of conspiracy theory or some sort of a website that has no credibility. And so that's another layer to this conversation that I think has emerged more recently for trial attorneys that as a prosecutor, I didn't have to deal with as much. But in a case like this, that is nationally and internationally, for that matter, of interest, potentially the potential for that is much higher.
Yeah, we would like to think that they do, but you're right. There's just human curiosity there. I'm not sure how much it affects the jury. Perhaps it does. I guess it can be, as you guys say, again, you're the attorneys, at least influential or prejudicial in some of these cases, but usually they don't admit it to the judge that they are doing it, correct?
No, because that's going to result in an immediate disqualification. Judge Subramanian has not released the alternates. And so because of that, he has the ability, if he finds out that any of the jurors have acted in a manner that's going to be prejudicial to the case or potentially prejudicial to either party in that sort of way, that would be a direct violation of his instructions and automatically result in their removal. So you're not going to have that. What you might have is if a juror sees another juror on their phone, for example, or something like that, and they notice that this is what's happening, another juror may tell on the other juror, but no juror is going to, at this point in the case, after having sat there for weeks, sort of self-report, understanding that they're going to be now removed because they could not follow the judge's instructions.
Katie?
They're coming back tomorrow at 9 a.m. They're not coming to the courtroom. They're going directly to the jury room to continue deliberating. I'm just really hung up, Don, on the fact that the note said that there are jurors on both sides that are unpersuadable. That in and of itself is just so powerful to me, because it means to me that whoever's the foreperson has been trying to guide these remaining 11 jurors in the privacy and the confidentiality of that room, and has been trying to kind of navigate the fact that they've got people that are digging on their heels on both sides. And again, this is reading tea leaves, guys, but when I think about jurors digging in their heels on him not being guilty on the racketeering, then that also made me think that maybe they're not coming back guilty on those remaining counts of the sex trafficking. Because to Charles' point, it's kind of, how would you build that case toward the RICO? You would build it by saying that Cassie and the other victims were a part of this criminal enterprise, not voluntarily, not willingly. And that is how you get to this criminal enterprise that he was running, as the racketeering count would suggest. But if you don't find them to be credible, then how could you possibly find him guilty on the racketeering? So I'm struggling with this one a little bit. And again, this is the reason why, we're spitballing here, Don. But I will say that if you're Sean Diddy Combs, you've been in custody since last year. So he hasn't been out and about. He's been in custody. He's been awaiting his trial. He does have a pretty impressive defense team that's been doing this case for him. But I always say that the federal government is the biggest law firm in the world. It's the most powerful law firm in the world, is the federal government. And so this has been a battle of power between both sides. But this is the type of case, Don, and I know Charles would agree, people go in prejudging this case.
Yes.
People go in, no matter how impartial they want to be, Don, they go in thinking this asshole did it or he didn't do it. Either way, it's very hard. It's almost like you have to back somebody off of a position versus convincing them otherwise. And that's just my experience, having tried a lot of cases and having just dealt with jurors and how they look at these cases.
I want to ask you guys something. Go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
No, I think Katie's exactly right. I think that this is the type of case that you don't expect reasonably, if you're an attorney from either side, that the jury does not have an opinion or did not come in with an opinion. Not just that, but the nature of the evidence that was presented in front of them naturally is going to push them in a particular direction, not from a legal standpoint, but just from an emotional standpoint. The testimony here, you had people on the stand crying, you had people on the stand talking about very personal, very intimate things, life-threatening things that an average person would be offended by. And regardless of the instruction or even the arguments that have been made about that testimony, it can't help but to stoke some level of emotion. And so you're just hoping, if you're either side, that whoever is dug in stays there and isn't going to compromise their position away from what it is that you want them to decide, simply for the sake of time or being agreeable if that's not what they believe. But you do have to sort of go into a case like this with the understanding that people are going to have prejudgments and made their minds up before they get to a point that they're willing to talk, willing to consider a different voice, and get swayed potentially to another position.
Look, I know that this isn't exact science, nor is it math, but when you have something like this, when they've decided on some charges and they can't decide on the other, and the judge says, go back, what does that usually mean? Is that good for the defense, good for the prosecution? I don't know. Because it seems like this jury is saying, look, we can't decide. We're kind of done here. And then they give them one or maybe two last chances, and then it's over. So what usually happens after this? Do they usually go back and decide, Katie, or is it like, they don't? Their minds are usually made up.
So again, the note said jurors on both sides are unpersuadable. That could just mean that they got tired at the end of the day, Don, and they were like, I don't want to hang out with these people any longer. This is where I am. You're not going to convince me otherwise. So piece the you-know-what out. Don't even try it with me anymore. I mean, they haven't been at this very long, though, right? I mean, think about it. They sat for 6 weeks through all of that testimony, a lot of it being very graphic and very jarring to have to see and hear and experience in real time, right? To the extent that they're hearing it from the victims themselves. And then they're sitting here and they've only been deliberating for 12 hours. And remember, when the notes come in, they stop, they have to get the note answer. I mean, there's a lot of start and stop that happens, Don. So it's not like they've been sitting with their butts in a chair for 12 hours straight. It's been a process for them. I will say this, though. the fact that both sides agreed to a portion of Cassie Ventura's testimony being sent back to the jury room, inclusive of text messages by and between Cassie Ventura and P. Diddy, before and after that Intercontinental Hotel incident in 2016 that was so violent and graphic that was on that video. The fact that both sides agreed for that portion and that transcript to go back could mean that they either wanted to get clarity on whether or not she was telling the truth, or they just wanted to be able to convince someone else in the room, look, it's not just my recollection. This is exactly what she said, and that's the reason why she's telling the truth. I mean, usually, Dawn, what happens is the judge just tells the jurors, you are supposed to rely upon your own independent recollection of what the testimony is. So the read back through the transcript is very interesting. That's unusual, at least for the cases I've tried. Usually the jurors are just told, rely upon what you know. But I don't expect them to deliberate very much longer tomorrow, Dawn. They're going to come back in the morning. I'd be surprised if they even go through lunch. I don't think they're going to take lunch. I think you're going to have a verdict on all of the counts before lunchtime tomorrow.
Why do you say that?
Because I think that they are more than 90% across the finish line. They have one count left. And I think they know that they could come back with a hung jury on that one count, Dawn, and they can come back with a verdict on those other four, and they've done their duty. And Charles's point from a few minutes ago was so well taken. July 4th is right around the corner. It's only after tomorrow, a day away, one business day away. They're not going to want to come back after the July 4th holiday weekend. They're done. They've been there for 6 weeks. They don't want to come back.
Yeah. Interesting. I have been looking behind the scenes and talking and getting some information from our friends over at the TMZ. And as you know, they're usually accurate about these things. And I've been watching Charles and his really crew of attorneys up discussing what will happen and what will not. And they've been offering me some information. I just want to listen to Harvey and team for just a little bit, see if we can gain some information from what they're saying. But again, I'm just warning you, this is behind the scenes. Let's take a listen.
Sure.
Yeah, you can just go over there and just say
clearance.
Yeah, you can start here, and then you can go. You can do whatever.
Let's do it.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
what
I don't
they
even have to mention you if you go over there. Okay.
what they've been doing is providing information to some of their sources and affiliates through this feed
in
that we're
less than
watching.
2 days, there is a verdict in Diddy, but there is a catch only as to 4 of the 5 counts. They are hung up on racketeering and
Yeah. So now you see what they're doing. They're preparing for the show, but they have been sharing with Steve, with the folks who they work with, and one of them is our channel here at the Don Lemon Show. And so Harvey and Charles have been sharing a bit of information with me through personally and also through here. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things as we're sort of listening in on this that I thought was interesting that Katie made me think about, we're discussing the verdict now, but for viewers who are looking at this totality and this timeline, I think it's very interesting to play the notion of like coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I think that when you're talking about Diddy, the Cassie testimony, and how that sort of framed this trial, particularly from her civil complaint and being able to match that up, I think that Sean Combs probably wishes that he had paid her earlier before that complaint was filed in civil court. A lot of those details were going to come out. We don't know what the timing of the investigation was in relation to the filing of that civil case. But the fact that that civil case was out there, even though it settled a day after, that complaint was publicly available and everyone poured over those details. So we had a sense of what this was going into it. We did not know how much federal prosecutors were going to rely on that complaint as far as building their case here. But it turns out a lot of those details ended up coming out on the stand. As Katie noted, part of what they used to buttress Cassie's testimony was the consistency between those facts and then building a narrative off of that. The fact that it had already been out there before the jury sat down, before that jury was impaneled, is not something that I think the defense loves at all. And so in hindsight, it just strikes me that that's something that if he had to do it all over again, he probably would have tried to pay that money before that complaint was filed, because then at least you don't have that narrative hanging out to, number one, influence a potential jury, and number two, create fodder for the prosecution to ultimately bolster the testimony and the credibility of their witnesses by saying, look, here you have it in multiple places and it's consistent.
I want to put something else up, Charles. This is a scene outside of the courthouse. We'll take the feed down and get back to them. But you see those microphones set up there. That's outside of the courthouse in Manhattan. Charles or Katie, are you expecting to hear from either the prosecution or the defense tonight? Are they going to come out and talk about this? It would be strange to me, but hey, maybe they will.
It's not the prosecution. I'll tell you that. It ain't going to be it's not the U.S. attorneys.
Right about that.
No.
Katie's absolutely right about that. It will not be the prosecution. They will have nothing to say. That is pretty standard. You're talking about the federal government. That's generally speaking not going to be something that they are able to comment on and would not take that risk. The defense, however, is absolutely going to try and toe the line in terms of creating a statement or a narrative or planting a seed that potentially could reach or sit home, not only in the court of public opinion, but more importantly, if you do have a juror who is loath to following the judge's instructions and potentially catches a soundbite or hears something from their comments that makes them think, this is an all hands on deck swinging for the fences effort that the defense has to try and get a juror to rethink their position. And I think that they're going to take any and every opportunity, even if it means, hey, I want to say something to media. I hope that a juror hears it. And I hope that the juror who hears it is dug in enough where they're going to stick to their position and is potentially going to be a mistrial on another account. And that they're smart enough not to say anything about having violated the judge's instructions. That seems like a lot of ifs, but at this point, if you're Sean Combs' defense team, it's a chance that you might take simply because you want to try and make sure that all points, all narratives, all seeds have been planted, and you get the jury to perhaps reconsider what their position has already been.
Okay, Katie, I want you to check your text for me, and then I'm gonna read some ads here. I'm gonna pay some bills, and then we're gonna get back to our panel. You're watching the Don Lemon Show. This is breaking news. We have a verdict in the P. Diddy trial. It is hung. They've decided on 4 of the charges, but they are hung up on the most serious charge, which is a racketeering charge. So stand by. I just want to get a word in from our sponsors, and then when we get back, we'll also have some breaking news as it relates to what is happening with Donald Trump and these deportations, and what some folks are calling this lockup Alligator Alcatraz down in Florida. We'll explain. Katie has someone that she's going to interview. But first, I want to tell you, support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from Lean, or Brick House Nutrition, which is Lean as a product of Brick House Nutrition. So guys, go big on the sale. Get stocked up on the best supplements from Brick House Nutrition. Their July 4th sale is on, and for a limited time, you can save 25% off of everything, and you have to use the code word Fireworks25. So that includes Lean. I love Lean, and my husband loves Lean as well. That's his favorite thing. Their #1 selling weight loss supplement. No injections, just real results from studied natural ingredients. Great time to slim down for the summer. Or you can choose Field of Greens, the superfruit and vegetable drink that literally promises your doctor will notice your improved health, or you get your money back. That is my favorite because I get all the nutrition I need in one drink and one supplement. So everything from Brick House Nutrition is incredible. I hear listeners rave about the collagen peptides, and the beauty experts swear that collagen is the fountain of youth for your skin and your hair. So let's go to Lean, get stocked up on their incredible supplements, and they will run out. They always do. Go to brickhousenutrition.com and use the code Fireworks for 25% off. The sales only for just a few days, and I know these products again sell out. That's brickhousenutrition.com, brickhousenutrition.com. Also, support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. It is summer. Lots of folks sitting around campfires or having dinners out, late night conversations. They're going to be swapping stories. There's a group here. Lately, one group is trying to control the whole story, claiming that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation and pushing their religion into classrooms, into courtrooms, and even your doctor's office. Okay, so here's what you need to do. This is where the Freedom from Religion Foundation comes in. It tries to stop that. They have been fighting for church and state separation since the 1970s. They have been fighting to keep 1978, as a matter of fact. They've been fighting in the courts and in the schools or wherever religion tries to take the wheel. So if you believe government should serve everyone, not just the religious right, make sure you join them. Okay, go to ffrf.us/freedom or text my name, Don, to 511-511 and become a member today. Join us and go to ffrf.us/freedom or text Don to 511-511 now, because the only story that should run this country is ours and not theirs. Text fees may apply. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Back to our program now. I'm joined now by Katie Phang and also the great Charles Coleman, two great attorneys. Katie, we have some other breaking news. We're going to continue to follow the Diddy story, and we're going to get back to that, but don't go away. But first, Katie has a guest she's going to introduce and talk to us about. What the hell is Alligator Alcatraz?
Oh, yeah, man. It's happening in my backyard. And I know that everybody thought it was a joke, but it's actually the official DHS Trump administration moniker for what is tantamount to a concentration camp for detained migrants here in the smack dab in the middle of the Everglades, Don. It's a horrific thing. It's this detention facility that has been rushed through by the Trump administration with the help of his crony, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And part of the reason why I wanted it to bring it and kind of highlight it to the Lemon Nation today, Don, is because Donald Trump came down to do a victory lap at Alligator Alcatraz today. He was flanked by DHS Secretary and dog killer Kristi Noem. And the two of them were just crowing over how amazing this particular place is going to be. But what was really outrageous is Donald Trump actually was trying to tell the media and showing them how the migrants, if they actually try to escape from Alligator Alcatraz, Don, he was trying to tell the media tips on how they're going to be able to avoid being eaten by the alligators in the middle of the Everglades. And we actually have a little bit of sound that we're going to play for the Lemon Nation right now.
And with the Alligator Alcatraz, is the idea that if some illegal immigrants escape, they just get eaten by an alligator or a snake or something?
I guess that's the concept. This is not a nice business. I guess that's the concept. If snakes are fast, but alligators are, but we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison, how to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%. Okay? Not a good thing.
Oh my God.
I mean, Don,
Wow.
First of all, I know at the Don Lemon show, and I know the Lemonheads, y'all all traffic in the truth and reality. And that hat he's wearing, it is not the Gulf of America. It is the Gulf of Mexico, people, number one. Number two, no joking here. That is total depravity, Don. That's not a joke. Those are people. They're entitled to due process because they are here on United States soil. But we've seen, Don, today as well with that big bullshit bill that the United States Senate barely got passed 51 to 50 today, that the immigration is being used as a boogeyman right now.
Yeah,
And
let me just say this before Charles has to go, so we're going to let him go, and we're going to bring Leah in. Charles, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. We appreciate you helping us out with the breaking news. Sorry, Katie, go ahead. Continue.
No, it's all good. I mean, listen, man, the justification for getting this BBB bill across the finish line today by Republicans, we saw it, Don, with our own eyes. JD Vance putting up tweets saying that the justification for screwing millions of Americans out of their health care and SNAP benefits and Medicaid was going to be satisfied by the immigration and border enforcement that the Trump administration is going to do. And that's the reason why I also wanted to have Leah Littman come in and hang out with us. She's one of the most brilliant constitutional law scholars that's out there. And the reason why is because I really wanted us to kind of do a little bit more of a conversation about that birthright citizenship case from Friday. Because right now, immigration is the thing, Don, that is being used by this administration to justify all of the bad. Every single thing. It may not seem like the through line. It may not be so clear, but it is totally the case. And that's why I wanted to make sure that the Lemon Nation heard from Leah Littman.
Hi, y'all.
Hi, Leah. How are you?
Oh, about as good as can be in this hellscape. But thank you for having me on.
Alligator Alcatraz. Where are we? This is ridiculous.
I mean, Alligator Alcatraz, I just don't think that should be the name. Alcatraz was a prison, right? This is just a camp that is set up. Individuals are going to be forced to be in over 100-degree heat in humid conditions. The temperatures that people were projecting were going to be over 100 degrees. This is happening less than 48 hours after news that a 70-year-old man, died in ICE custody. This is a man who just had a 20-year-old conviction for marijuana. And I think the extent to which they are dehumanizing and just like making essentially a Hunger Games entertainment style out of terrorizing migrants and non-citizens, that is how they are trying to govern. And I agree with Katie that the Supreme Court's decision to potentially allow them to partially implement their great replacement theory of the Constitution by denying people birthright citizenship is part of this movement and part of what makes the Supreme Court's decision so egregious in the case.
Yeah, and Leah, you know what? On Friday, we had that horrific decision from SCOTUS concerning birthright citizenship, and I understand that it dealt with a specific procedural issue that was nationwide injunctions and the appropriateness of it. But then I also kind of covered, even on my own YouTube channel today, the fact that the Department of Justice Civil Division, and Don, this is something I think y'all have been talking about too, with the Lemon Nation, that the Department of Justice Civil Division that used to go after civil rights violations, that they're now going to be going after naturalized U.S. citizens, people that actually were born in another country, went through the process, swore allegiance to the United States, and became U.S. citizens. But they're giving the DOJ Civil Division wide berth to figure out whatever the hell they think some bullshit excuse is to be able to go and take away your citizenship. So, Don, it's not just taking undocumented immigrants and violating their due process, revoking temporary protected status or humanitarian parole status, which was legal for people, and then saying, psych, now you're an illegal, so we can deport your ass in the middle of the night. Now, Leah, they're going to be able to do it to naturalized citizens?
Well, so add to that what the Supreme Court has allowed them to do by way of deportations. The Supreme Court has allowed the administration to send people to third countries, countries other than their countries of origin, countries other than their countries of nationality, countries that have not been designated for their removal. You know, the administration tried to ship people to Libya, where people are at risk of being trafficked and sold into slavery when they are imprisoned there. They tried to send people to Sudan, a country on the brink of the civil war. Are they going to try to do the same to the denaturalized citizens that they are potentially targeting, right? Just because they are Black, brown, progressive, democratic, right? Engaged in some speech that the administration did not care for. I mean, the administration's threats, what they are doing, I think is so terrifying. You know, I'm sure Don Lemon Nation is aware of the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man who was wrongfully expelled to El Salvador based on an administrative error. He is returned now in the United States, where he is facing criminal charges. A truly horrifying development is he has asked to remain in federal custody before his trial so that he is not at risk of being snatched up by ICE and sent off to some third country, because that is what ICE was threatening to do. How dire is it that we are now in a place where, in order to protect your civil rights, you are trying to stay in detention before your trial? And the gross abuses that they are engaged in, the number of people they are threatening, and we are just 6 months into the administration. I mean, I realize that people might look at this and say, oh, these are naturalized citizens. Again, we are 6 months in. If you think they are not going to try to do the same to anyone, right, they could potentially disagree with, you are deluding yourself, again, because they are now trying to deny people birthright citizenship that is guaranteed under the United States Constitution.
Don, I want you to check out, this was posted on the cesspool of Twitter. It'll never be X to me, let me be very clear. But this was posted by the official DHS account today. And I want everybody in Lemon Nation who's tuning in right now to see it, because it was just absurd. That is the Homeland Security DHS official account on X. And Don, it's alligators wearing ice caps. I mean, Leah, does it?
Oh my God!
It's so, and I'm sorry, Don, because I know I'm filling in, and I don't mean to offend your guests, but it's so fucking depraved to me that an official agency can do this, and that this is the way that they think that Americans are supposed to live in fear. Leah, my question is, doesn't any of this that's happening with this Alligator Alcatraz implicate cruel and unusual Eighth Amendment issues? I mean, are we going to be looking at constitutional challenges for this type of conditions that these people are living in?
So legally, there is this tricky situation where individuals who might be challenging this would be having to navigate. And that's because immigration is technically considered civil in nature.
Oh, wait, but the GOP loves to say how these are criminal people criminally doing criminal stuff when they come in.
And yet, right, they often do not try to bring criminal charges where they would actually be required to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, in courts of law. So technically, right, if the administration is just engaged in traditional civil enforcement of immigration law, that is civil in nature. But I think there is a strong case to be made that the administration is trying to use these conditions to punish people as punitive. And I think for that reason, we are kind of entering into uncharted legal terrain where there is a very good argument that, again, the administration is targeting people as punishment, subjecting them to these cruel conditions to punish them, and targeting them to make an example out of them. These are all reasons that sound like criminal law. And therefore, I think, right, individuals challenging this would have a strong argument that this is cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment.
Yeah, but what would happen? What's going to happen, Katie? And by the way, you can't offend elimination. We like we like to say how we feel, and they're going to love you. They'll be like, "Where's Katie? Bring her back! Bring her back!"
Katie.
But Katie, as we know, Katie and Leah, the cruelty is the point here, and there are no repercussions in the court, it appears, because Donald Trump now owns the judicial branch as well, and even the legislative branch. He's just ignoring all of them, or not following the orders of federal judges.
Yeah, I mean, it's the non-compliance. Leah and I've talked about it at length as well. It's incredibly frustrating because I'd say this, Dawn, and to the Lemonheads, Leah and I grew up proper girls. We grew up as proper lawyers, meaning we grew up knowing that you had to have decorum and be polite and professional. You had to be competent in the job that you were doing as an attorney. And you certainly were not going to be making affirmative misrepresentations to a court. You weren't going to be ignoring a court order. And all of that is happening right now. And my frustration has been, I feel like the judiciary has forgotten that they are a co-equal branch of government, and they are lifetime appointees on the federal bench, and that they have the ability to sanction and to hold power to account because that's what they're supposed to do. They are interpreting the law. The legislator creates the law. The enforcement comes through the judges, and I just am really disappointed. And Leah, I think you and I have talked about this too, to Don's point, because there's no consequence. It's like Trump and the administration, they're worse than a toddler, because at least a toddler knows that if you tell them not to do it, 99% of the time they figure it out, they're not supposed to do it, but they don't care. Trump doesn't care.
So I would draw a distinction between the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts, because I think thus far a lot of lower federal courts have understood their job is to apply the law and enforce the law against the administration. You have had judges try to hold the administration in contempt for violating their court orders. You have had judges clearly pronounce, "You administration have violated my court order." Then what happens when the Trump administration rushes those cases off to the United States Supreme Court? The Supreme Court blocks the lower court orders, rewards the government's defiance of those lower court orders by telling the government you don't have to continue to comply with the lower court order. So I think this is a situation of the Supreme Court and the Trump administration versus the lower federal courts. And again, that's part of what makes the decision on nationwide injunctions so problematic. Is the Supreme Court basically told the lower courts, we are going to take away one of your most powerful tools for reining in the Trump administration. And we, Supreme Court, are going to insist that it's all up to us. And we know what that means.
And, Dom, what's kind of crazy right now is today, like I said, the Senate voted on that big bullshit bill. And J.D. Vance had to run to the Capitol to break that tie to make it a 51-50, because otherwise it wouldn't have gotten across the finish line. And what's crazy is that billions upon billions of dollars has now been earmarked in that Senate version of the big bullshit bill for immigration and border enforcement, while Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act will be cut by more than $1 trillion. And we have millions of people that are going to lose their health care coverage. They're not going to get their SNAP benefits. I mean, I could go on. And, Dawn, it makes me just underscore the importance of something you talk about all the time, which is the voting makes a difference, not just for the people that are sitting in Congress, but that also makes a difference for our judiciary. Because Leah's point is, if you've got that seat of power, you're the one appointing these justices, you're the one appointing these judges, and they're the ones that are sitting there interpreting what people are doing, whether it's criminal or not, whether it's civil or not, whether it's compliant or not. And so you control the levers of power if you are in that seat of power. And that's why we need to make sure that people not only reach out and they contact their congressional reps right now, because the House gets this freaking ugly bill back. And we've heard reporting that as of close of business today, more than 20 Republican representatives are going to vote no on this bill because it sinks us into a $4 trillion deficit, more so than it did before. So we got to keep on working this. We got to work the phones, flood the zone, because it's the only way that people are going to be able to hear us, absent us voting them out of office.
Mm-hmm. Well, Leah, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you we have so much breaking news today.
I know, it's crazy.
So
There
much
it is.
news.
Leah, where do we get you? We see Lawless up there. Tell our
Yes,
viewers.
so that is my recent book, Lawless: How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. If you want to know exactly where all the nutso and cray-cray coming out of the Supreme Court comes from, this book is for you. It literally describes how the Republican justices are laundering the political talking points of the Republican Party and also their innermost feelings into the law. So you can get that book wherever you get your books. I also co-host a podcast, Strict Scrutiny. New episodes are out every Monday. And I am a social media poster as well. So I'm on Blue Sky, and my dog has an Instagram account.
Hey, Don, she's a Swiftie. She's
Oh,
a serious
wow.
Swiftie too. I don't know if you can see
gosh.
The Tortured Poets Department album in the background, or the image of the red scarf. It was rare. I was there. It was all too well.
Oh my gosh. And you guys are obviously good friends and have worked together before. So thank you for appearing on the Don Lemon Show, the Don Lemon channel, with our great Katie Phang. Thank you, Leah. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Katie Phang, we're back. I'm going to put up this live picture, and then Katie and I are going to continue to discuss this. This is the Manhattan, the federal court out in Manhattan.
Yeah.
We're looking at outside of the federal court right now. If you can put that up for us, Andy. And this is where they have reached a verdict on some of the counts earlier today. I sent you the link to it. Some of the counts earlier today, but they are hung up on the most important count, the one that is really for all the marbles in this particular case. Again,
sorry,
and
it's a news report right now.
Yeah. Okay. But also, no, this is the second one. I sent you another one. I texted you another one. So anyways, there are microphones set up outside of that courtroom, but as Katie and Charles have been saying, they are not, the prosecution will not be participating in this.
No.
It will probably be the defense who is participating in this, if they come out at all. Maybe
they have a gag
can-
order too, though, Don. So I don't really know with that gag order if they're going to be talking a lot, if at all. I haven't looked at the gag order. It could be just you can't talk about the case, but maybe just talk in general. I have no idea, but I don't know why they would have the mics out like that. You and I both know that's presser mics. You know, it's definitely some type of press conference or something.
Yeah, but it's not for the reporters who are there. I mean, the way they have it set up, it's like, you know, everybody's microphone is there. At least we saw that earlier. Everyone's microphone is there, and it looks like they're
weird.
Yeah.
I will say this too, you know, and I want to remind everybody at the elimination, the jury is a jury of 12. So in a criminal case, you have to have a unanimous verdict versus in a civil case. And so all 12 people have to reach an agreement on each and every one of those 5 counts in the federal indictment. Each count stands alone. Each count has to have a unanimous verdict as to each count. The jury is made up of 8 men and 4 women. 8 men and 4 women are sitting in judgment. It is a jury of Puff Daddy, P. Diddy's peers, quote unquote, his peers. And so that jury is the one that's been convening. It's been deliberating now for 12 hours, come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., resume deliberations. The one count, the count 1 of that indictment, the racketeering count, the RICO count, that is the one that they have told the judge, that they are hung up on, that they cannot reach a verdict on that one, but that they've reached a verdict on counts 2 through 5. But I also want to remind everybody too, that the jury could come back tomorrow and change their minds on those remaining counts, Don. They could come back and say, you know what, Don, you've convinced me. You've convinced me. And I actually want to change my mind as to count fill in the blank. So kind of, it's a mixed bag right now. It's definitely a mixed bag, and we're going to have to see tomorrow what happens.
You can say busted, you can say whatever, you can say fuck, you can say whatever on this channel. The folks like it. We like the real news here, and as we know, we could not always do that in the old iterations of ourselves.
That
And
is
now we
right.
can. We are free. Katie, I want to continue to report on this for you. Just stand by it because I want to just get a word from our sponsors in, if you will. So support for the Don Lemon Show today also comes from a very important sponsor, one that I really like, and that is 120 Life. 120 Life is a proud supporter of the Don Lemon Show. Did you know that high blood pressure is the #1 risk factor for mortality? 1 in 2 adults has it. That is a 50-50 chance that you're a walking time bomb. Here's the good news, though. You can take control of your blood pressure naturally without relying on Big Pharma. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting superfood juices that have been shown to actually help lower your blood pressure. It's not just for high blood pressure either. It is also beneficial for other health conditions like diabetes. Now, just so you know, in my family, there's a history of high blood pressure and also a history of diabetes. My grandmother had high blood pressure. My mother has it. My sister had it, which was part of her health issues. And my dad, sadly, succumbed to complications from diabetes. So look, this is very helpful and very important to me. 120 Life is trusted by healthcare professionals with hundreds of doctors recommending it to help manage blood pressure naturally. It provides visible, measurable changes in blood pressure. You can use a simple monitor at home to track your progress. So for a limited time, try 120 Life and save 20% off. Just use the code DON at checkout at 120life.com. 120 Life offers a risk-free trial with a refund if you don't see lower numbers in just 2 weeks. So go to 120life.com and use the code DON. Then you could save 20%. There's nothing to lose except for your high blood pressure number. So go to 120life.com, use the code DON, save up to 20%. Remember, you must use the code DON to get that special offer. So this is serious. This is your life. And we're talking about 120 Life can help. So back to our show now. So 120 Life, speaking of helping, the great Katie Phang is helping us out today, and I'm glad she is because she is an expert on this. I didn't realize, I was like, wait a minute, I thought that it was something different happening with the show, and when I popped on and I saw Katie, I'm like, they didn't need me. They got Katie back.
No. Let me tell you something. You are sorely missed. Everybody's been spectacular. I've been catching all the fill-ins since you've been gone, but my friend, look at you. Your level of devotion is pretty inspirational. Even on your well-earned vacay, you decided to jump on and join the Lemonation to be able to, and selfishly, look, I love seeing you no matter where you are and no matter what we're doing. So
I'll just tell you that I'm a couple of hours ahead. So I was well into about bedtime, and then I got the thing on Diddy. And I texted, I was like, you guys, because I saw the Alcatraz thing, I was like, you you tell me you're going to do Diddy. And you both people were like, we got it. And I said, well, don't, hold on, wait for me. And they did not have to wait for me because you're more competent than I am to handle this particular story. But give me your personal thoughts on this, because this is a very big deal. This is not something that we usually cover, not a lot of celebrity trials, but this goes on beyond celebrity, doesn't it, Katie?
Yeah, and and I appreciate you kind of bringing it home this way because Don, there is celebrity associated with this case. It's P. Diddy, somebody who's been in the public discourse in terms of music and art and movies, film, or whatever for a while. But this is also a part of the bigger kind of conversation about, do we believe women? Do we believe our victims? Do we want to be able to create a place and a space where people are able to come forward, even after years of suffering in silence, to be able to seek justice? When I was a prosecutor, Don, I prosecuted sexual assault, sexual abuse cases. And of course, the common refrain we hear is, well, why didn't so-and-so report it sooner? Why didn't they call the police immediately? I mean, we all know that there's so many complicated and more nuanced issues that kind of factor into the decisions that are made as to why law enforcement is or is not notified. And unless you are, living in that situation, you can't necessarily speak to whether or not you felt either comfortable. Maybe somebody wasn't going to believe you because it's P. Diddy that is the person that you were accusing of a crime. So, I mean, I think these are the conversations. It's not the salaciousness. Everybody saw the pictures of the baby oil and all of the freak offs. I mean, it was just kind of wild to kind of read the allegations. And it's interesting too. P. Diddy's defense team got up not only in jury selection, but in opening statements, and has kind of the theme for the Diddy defense has been, yeah, don't judge our client for his sexual proclivities. That doesn't make it a crime. And it reminds me of that movie from years ago called Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. And in one scene in that movie, Keanu Reeves gets up and he basically tells a jury, because his client has been accused of murder, that his client is not a murderer, but he's an adulterer. And basically you can hate him and not like him because he cheats on his wife, but it doesn't make him a murderer. And in the same case, it's, you may not like what PD does in the kind of privacy of his home, but that doesn't make him a sex trafficker. And it doesn't make him somebody that transported somebody across state lines for purposes of prostitution. And it doesn't make him the ringleader of a criminal enterprise. But on the flip side, though, Don, you can't ignore that video of Cassie Ventura getting beaten.
Yeah.
You can't ignore the photos. You can't ignore the testimony. I mean, but this is why our judicial system exists. This is why jury trials exist. Plea offer not taken by P. Diddy in this case, and he chose to go to trial, and that is the reason why we are where we are right now.
What an amazing fall from grace. And even if, let's just say, I'm not saying that this will happen, just say that perhaps he may be found not guilty. There is living this down. He will never live this down. And all the information that has come out of this trial, that will never, ever happen. So in the court of public opinion, I'm not sure. I think a lot of folks, obviously, as you said, that video sticks in the minds of everyone. So I think in the court of public opinion, he is guilty of beating a woman, obviously, right? Because we see it there, and then we'll never live that down.
Yeah, with our own eyes. With our own eyes, Don, and the jury has seen that video now repeatedly, because remember that video came out before this trial, before these charges were brought. And then the judge made a ruling that the jury could see the video in the context of the prosecution of this case. So the jury has seen that video. That video was entered into evidence. So the jury has received the evidence in the jury room, and that includes that video of him beating Cassie Ventura.
And perhaps we might not even be here if not for that video. A jury in Manhattan has reached a partial verdict in the federal case against music mogul and rapper Sean Diddy Combs. They deliberated for about 12 hours, saying that the jury saying it's deadlocked on a charge of racketeering conspiracy, and that is the big charge. It happened at about 4:05, just about an hour before 4:05 Eastern time in the U.S. It happened about an hour before we went on the air. We started streaming here. The jury sent a note to the judge saying that it had reached a verdict on 4 of the 5 counts against Combs, 2 counts each of sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution, but was unable to come to a decision on the racketeering charge. The note from the panel said that there were jurors with unpersuadable opinions on both sides. Meaning what, Katie?
That means that there are people that are advocating in the privacy and the confidentiality of that jury room of those 12 jurors, Don. And there are people that are saying he's guilty on count 1, with other jurors saying he's not guilty on count 1. And then here's the third wrinkle, Don. There could be jurors that are saying the prosecution didn't prove its case. Isn't that an interesting thought for a second, right? It's not guilty or not guilty. You are not guilty, Don, if the prosecution doesn't carry its burden of proof. But there could be jurors that are saying there's just nothing there for racketeering, but there is enough there for sex trafficking and transportation for purposes of prostitution. We're going to see. But no matter what, if this guy is found guilty even on one of these counts, he's definitely not a spring chicken, Don. So if he gets even on one of these counts, he's going to be looking at a decent amount of time. Even the transportation has a max of 10 years.
Yeah, isn't it like 15 or so on even now? It's about 15 years or so.
It's 15 to life on the sex trafficking, and he has 2 counts of that, and it's a max of 10 years in federal prison on the transportation, and then the racketeering is the big doozy. That one is the life. So like I said, and a guilty verdict on any one of these counts is not going to be a good thing for P. Diddy.
Yeah. P. Diddy's 55 years old, was arrested in September, charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He faces a sentence that could extend to life in prison if convicted on the most serious charges. You want to take us home and take us out of here, Katie, or you want me to do it? It's your show. I'm just sitting here.
No, listen, I'm going to say this. I know everybody wants to hear from you. I just want to say thank you for the privilege of entrusting me to be here in your stead while you were going on that and spending time on your well-earned vacation. I also want to give a shout out, Dawn, if I may. They are well known to Lemonheads at the Lemon Nation, but I do want to say that your team has been fantastic, Dawn. Some of the hardest working people, so smart, so fast. And I really want to give out a shout out to Nikki, Peter, and Andy. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to work with them while you've been out.
They're the best. When my sister died, they took care of me. I didn't have to worry about the channel at all. It was like, I know that they're in good hands. And tonight they're like, when are you coming on? What time? Give us a time. And then I realized, I'm like, it's Katie. And then they probably would have told me, we don't need you tonight. But they are the best. I'm really, really, really lucky to have them. I'm very grateful to have them. And we're also very grateful to have you and also our friends over at the Midas Touch Network,
Yes.
of which you are a member. What a fantastic team they are as well. And they are mentors of ours and also big supporters and fans of ours as well as we are of them. So Katie, thank you. Will you come back and hang with us?
Anytime. Listen, the Lemonation is a spectacular place to be. I appreciate the community here. To your point, we're very real people. We're keeping it real. And that's exactly what we're here to do.
By the way, this is not PJs. This is just a summer vacation. I know it looks like PJs.
If it's PJs, that's fine with me too. I don't care, my friend. You wear what you want to wear.
People are making fun of it. No, it's part of just my little vacation outfit here. But thank you guys. Thank you for joining us, Katie. And look, make sure you hit the thumbs up. Make sure you hit the like. We appreciate it. You guys know it affects the algorithm. More people become aware of our channel, and our conversation is very important to us. Make sure you become a member as well. The subscribe button is right at the bottom right hand of the screen, right below the comments. So we hope that you would subscribe. Thank you. All right. Hit the hearts, hit the like. Go check out Katie over on the Midas Touch Network, and she'll be joining us hopefully as well. If Ben can spare her some time, because I know they're very busy over there. So Katie, thank you. And you guys always know that I say this every time. You can be informed without being inundated. You don't have to sit in front of the television all day and get outrage porn or corn, depending on, we don't want the AI to kick us off. And be outraged. So until we see you at 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning, bright and early, turn the TV off. Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.